Hi everyone! This is the first episode in my essay extravaganza where I take a look at issue essay prompts and actually, as unedited as possible, go through all of them. So what I've already done is put together all of ETS's possible issue essay prompts, which you can find on their website, and I'll put a link to that in the description down below, but they've posted every single possible essay prompt on their website, and so I've taken all of them and put them into an Excel spreadsheet. Now there's a total of 156 possible prompts. Because I have a title line, those are all scattered in between lines 2 to 156 of my Excel spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do for each essay is use this random number generator to come up with a number, and then we will take whatever prompt is on that number and run with it. So as you know, the essay section is going to be 30 minutes each, and I will be talking through all of my ideas, my brainstorming process, everything as I go through it. So hopefully this is super helpful for you and you can get an idea of how I was able to get a 5 and a 6 on my essays. So with that, I will click on generate. So we have 157 for our first essay. So I will pull up my Excel spreadsheet. So prompt number 107 is going to be, or line 107 is going to be right here. Okay. So this is going to be slightly clunky because of how I've done this, so bear with me, but you will be able to see why I've put all of these prompts into an Excel spreadsheet in a future video that I'm very excited about. So with that, I will put everything into this. All right, I need to think a little bit about the formatting here because that's very confusing. So apologize. All right. Okay. So I'm just copy and pasting it so that I can actually read it and it's not in columns. All right, and then I will start a 30-minute timer as well. And hopefully in future videos, I'll be able to put it on screen. But for now, we'll go ahead and start. And I'll read it just like you would see on the actual test itself. So we have a claim and a reason. Claim: researchers should not limit their investigations to only those areas in which they expect to discover something that has an immediate practical application. Reason: it is impossible to predict the outcome of a line of research with any certainty. All right, this is really cool because I actually have not done too much work on claim and reason questions. But one thing to note is that I have a video talking about a little bit on what the structure of an essay should look like, but in general, I like 3 body paragraphs. And we have this: researchers should not limit their investigations only to areas in which they expect to discover something that has an immediate practical application. And then the extent to which you agree or disagree with the claim and the reason on which the claim is based. So what I'm gonna do here is go with mostly agree. Should not limit investigations. So the first body paragraph, I definitely want to talk about the reason. So definitely impossible to predict the outcome of research with certainty. And then some sort of example. I don't have something that comes to mind quite yet, so I'll leave that blank. What I'll do with paragraph 2 is kind of expand on that. So expand on limitations, and I'll probably look at this immediate practical application thing. Immediate practical application, something that came up with an application a long time after the study was started. Okay, and then 3, I will say I'll make this sort of my concession, and the reason is because I want to address the opposite point of view, and that really strengthens my own argument. So I will say application of research is important because we want to advance our society, and then also think about the resources that go into research. But what I definitely want to do is acknowledge that that's sometimes true, but limiting is still bad, and I haven't come up with exactly why yet, so hopefully this is a really raw look at how I would approach something like this. So impossible to predict the outcome of research with uncertainty. I would say something like good research is usually uncertain. So one thing that I do a lot is looking at needs assessments. For example, I work in public health, so needs assessments, and those are really useful because we don't bias what is going to come. And then sometimes we come up with information that will be useful at a later date. Actually, so this is kind of similar to what I would say here. So as you can see, I'm doing a little bit of editing and moving back and forth. Now, it's been less than 5 minutes, and as I've mentioned before, I usually take quite long in brainstorming and writing my ideas down because I can make sure that I have everything I need before I actually start writing. So what else? Needs assessments, we don't bias what's going to come. And let's see. I think, as you can see, I'm having a bit of trouble, which is totally normal, and I absolutely expect you to have the same thing, so don't panic at all. Just notice I'm staying calm and trying to think a little bit more. So, impossible to predict the line of research with any certainty. So, impossible to know. We don't know what to find, and we don't want to bias what's going to come. So this is specifically about predicting the outcome of a line of research with certainty. And then I think I would just say a little bit more about sciences, about learning more, especially when we don't know what to expect. And then here, in our second body paragraph, I'm talking a little bit about expanding on limitations, immediate practical applications, something that so sometimes having that practical application is really important, but sometimes we come up with information that won't be useful until later, and I feel like there are so many good examples that just are not coming to mind right now. So what I'm gonna do is something that I would recommend for you as well, which is I'm just gonna make something up here. So what I'm gonna say is something about, let's say, something that I could probably vaguely kind of shape for my own purposes. So we're looking at the biology of octopuses. Octopuses, or octopi, we'll say. We didn't know about the application of their regeneration at the time, but the info is now useful after we learned a lot about how human stem cells work. So keep in mind, again, this example is totally something I just pulled out of my butt, but the key that we want to focus on here is how I explain my ideas, how I'm able to talk about it, rather than whether or not what I'm actually using is scientifically accurate. And if you know anything about the biology of octopi or regeneration or whatever, you can probably prove me quite wrong. All right, so I think here the only thing that I really want to talk more about is the concession. So the application of research is definitely important, but limiting it, and what I'm doing with the but is saying my point of view is still correct, because let's see, what do I want to say? I want to reiterate some of the arguments that I've made in body paragraphs 1 and 2, but I also want to go a little bit further. So limiting is still bad because of reasons 1 and 2, and it's very difficult to determine to be fair in what? To be fair in determining what is useful and what is not, right? So I'm going a little bit more about, a little bit more into what I want to say. So normally you can brainstorm any way you want, but since I want to be able to show you guys everything that I'm thinking and going through, I'm writing it all on here. All right, so I think I am ready to write, and I will actually make the text slightly smaller so I can see everything. All right, so in research, it is very difficult to, I would say, all right, in science, we want to learn as much as possible about ourselves and the world around us. Because there is so much to know, it is difficult to be able to predict the outcome of something if it has not been studied before. All right, so as a result, I believe we should not, in general, limit our investigations to topics that we expect to produce an immediate application. So I've stated my claim, a bit of an introduction. I've stated my claim. I've made it general, so in general, and that sets up my concession paragraph really well. And what I like to do is set up each of my paragraphs so it's easier for me to follow along as I'm writing, since as you know, I'm kind of paying attention to a lot of different things so far. I'm going to say this is because being able to predict the outcome of research with certainty is very rare. So that's my first paragraph. And then the second one is, it is often possible to use findings from research in applications years after they have been found. So that sets up number 2. And actually, I will just do that. And what I'll do with the concession is just kind of pop it in, quote unquote, pop it in at the end. And the reason I don't want to put it in the introduction is because in the introduction, I really want to focus in on what my own point of view is. All right, so, okay. So, as mentioned, good research is usually uncertain. This can hold true for all fields and both qualitative and quantitative research. Science is about learning more and trying to expand our understanding of the world around us. Notice I just made a typo there, but Word automatically fixed it for me. On the GRE, it won't do that, so that's something to keep in mind, but not something to really worry about since small typos are not that important. As such, new information can be difficult to predict. For example, a lot of my work is conducting needs assessments of various communities. Before we go into a project, it is best to keep an open mind and not predict what the outcome will be, because we do not want to bias the results. All right, and once I've talked about that example, I want to tie that back to good research being uncertain. This prevents our research from forcing a top-down mindset that can produce erroneous answers. When we begin studies, we prefer to have a strong question, but no strong prediction of the results, so that we can produce higher quality data. All right, and then moving on to expanding the limitations. Moreover, information gathered from a study that does not expect immediate application gives it more leeway and could become more useful at a later date. All right, and then, for example, a good study with no immediate application was the study of regeneration of octopi arms. At the time, this information would not have been very useful, as there was little that people could do with it. Even zookeepers who interacted with octopi often. However, researchers ended up finding that this data was extremely beneficial to understanding how human stem cells could be added, could be, I would say, like farmed and used in amputees, how human stem cells could be farmed and used in amputees in the early 2000s. So as you can see, since this is an example that I'm not actually really drawing anything from, I'm adding in a few more details just to give a bit of context. So the octopus information was not that useful, and at the time we just wanted to learn more, right? But it actually ended up being quite useful, right? Researchers found that this data was extremely beneficial to understanding how human stem cells could be farmed in the early 2000s. These data on octopi fast-forwarded human stem cell research by a decade, according to one newspaper article, because of the similarities in biology between octopi and humans. So what I'm doing there is kind of explaining the octopus research and why that's been so beneficial. So what I want to do is tie everything together. So there are countless similar examples of findings whose applications were not discovered until decades later, but pushed forward scientific understanding by decades. The scientists involved and the general public, as a result, greatly benefited from having the previous information. So really emphasizing the idea that that previous research and the previous work was very valuable and really important. Okay, and then a little bit on my concession, and what I'm gonna do is copy and paste that down here so I can read it and see it all on one page. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar, a concession is really good for addressing the other point of view, but using that to really strengthen your own argument. And that's a big thing that a lot of people do not very well. And I do have a full video on how to write a concession paragraph. So I will acknowledge, so application of research is important because we want to advance our society. Oftentimes, good research can take significant human and material resources, so they should not go to waste. So acknowledging that there is value in having that application. However, so here in my plan, I'm talking about reasons 1 and 2, and I've already forgotten them. So I'm going back and taking a look at it. Research is uncertain, and it could be useful at a later date. However, because of the unpredictability of research results and the fact that some information could prove invaluable in the future, it is still valuable to pursue topics that have no immediate use. Furthermore, so I am adding on to the reasoning for that, so I'm really strengthening my own argument a little bit more. Furthermore, because we often do not know what research will produce before we have conducted it, it is almost impossible to be fair in determining what is useful and what is not. And then I always want an extra sentence to kind of tie everything together. So in the end, application of research findings should only be one consideration of whether or not to conduct the study. All right, and I will delete my notes, so that it reads like a very normal paragraph. And then I think what I want to do at the end, I actually have about 5 minutes, is write a short conclusion paragraph. So this is really not super necessary. It's really to help basically tie everything together and have a very kind of solid conclusion. So what I will say is that research can often be unpredictable and I'm trying to think of a word that kind of means not immediately useful. And results may be useful in surprising ways, even if we don't realize that at the beginning. Despite the potential opportunity cost of useless research, so talking a little bit about that concession, findings may end up benefiting society in a variety of ways. All right, so a really short and sweet, and I actually have a few minutes left over, and I know this is not the case for many people when you take the test, but if you have a few minutes left over, you can go back and take a look at what you've written and try to add or change anything that doesn't make sense. So generally, I will leave the intro paragraph because the bulk of what I'm talking about is going to be in the two body paragraphs. So as mentioned, good research is usually uncertain. This can hold true for all fields and both qualitative and quantitative research. Science is about learning more and trying to expand our understanding of the world around us. As such, new information can be difficult to predict. So that transition is a little bit weird. But nothing comes to mind so far, so I'm just going to leave it. For example, a lot of my work is conducting needs assessments of various communities. I would say, let's say, needs assessments of various communities. All right, before we go into a project, it's best to keep an open mind and not to predict what the outcome will be because we do not want to bias the results. So this aligns a lot with being uncertain and, learning more. This prevents our research from forcing, I would say, something like sometimes participants can even inform us of something that we did not know about before, and this can enhance our understanding of that community's needs. So that really strengthens that idea of we can learn more and we can find out something that we didn't know before. This prevents our research from forcing a top-down mindset that can produce erroneous answers. So I actually think this is erroneous with an E. My bad. When we begin studies, we prefer to have a strong question, but no strong prediction of the results so we can produce higher quality data. This also leaves us open to finding completely new and surprising things that we would have missed if we had certain rigid expectations. All right, so that is just about 30 minutes. Cool. So as you can hear the timer, 30 minutes. So hopefully this is really helpful for you just to kind of see how I brainstorm and write within that 30-minute time limit. And as you can see, you can kind of get an idea of what my thought process was. If I come up with an example that I don't really 100% know how to pursue, how I kind of made up something and tried to align it really well with my main thesis paragraph. So what I will do is you will be able to find a link to this essay and all of the other ones that I end up writing in the description down below, so please do check it out. And if this is something that you are trying to learn more about, do check me out at AliceChenGRE.com. Thanks. For more information on how you can actually implement these tips and tricks into getting a better score on your GRE, please visit AliceChenGRE.com. I have more information about what it's like to work with me. For example, that I was patient and kind, I explained things to Sarah thoroughly and offered examples and tips. With Joshua, I gave him a better understanding of what he should work on to get over that 150 score that he was aiming for. I have more information about how private GRE tutoring works with me. For example, you can choose between writing, quantitative, and or the verbal section. I will give you a customized study plan with session agendas for each time we meet. I can provide sample questions, different study resources, do a content review, go over strategies and examples with you, and as always, I offer flexible payment and scheduling options. Thanks so much for watching!